recordings are shared and managed if they're not through the single account.
Okay. Okay, well, recording is in progress. Hello, everybody. So, welcome to sunny Madison, Wisconsin, although you still have to wear a coat.
Yeah.
It was just a happy coincidence. Mike lives about 40 minutes north of me. So, in
Oh,
in where are you, Mike? In Baraboo?
Actually, in Lodi.
Lodi.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, Baraboo is the birthplace of the Ringling Brothers. So, okay. So, this may be all of us, which is good. The vital few.
Mhm.
So, what I have some slides to share. I'd send it to you if you want to follow with me, use them, or you can just follow with me. Let me share my slides. So when I do the full screen presentation, sometimes I don't have everybody on the screen. Um, so or I don't see or raise your hand. Just jump in. It's okay. Uh,
Hey,
and
Fazel, I was going to ask you, I know you taught a lot of this to students at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Is some of this additional information that you're providing, the PowerPoint, is this some of the content that you shared with your students?
the main concepts are on systems thinking, but of course I had a lot of examples, and I use one of them with you today. So it's basically the same slides I've used over the years. I just update them. So um, as Don Wheeler said one time, there is nothing new under the sky. So so that's yeah, this is what I use. Mike's daughter was interested in one of my courses that I was teaching in healthcare operations management. I taught operations management and quality in a lot of places and a variety of courses. And some of these slides were from that, Mike. I'm happy to send you the whole slides of the course if
That'd be
she's in.
great. Thank you.
Yeah, if she's interested. They're narrated too, so it was an online course. All right. Well, let me share my screen with you, and I'm going to the presentation. Okay, so this module today we'll be talking about um, competency one, the ability to think in terms of systems and knowing how to lead systems. Peter has six competencies in the Leader's Handbook. And then in chapter 3, which he introduces the CPAC model, and we touch on the purpose. I know a lot of people, I pronounce that CPAC. This is how Peter pronounced it, and this is how he actually suggested in his book how to pronounce it. He said, pronounce it as though it is SEE-POK. So, so it's CPAC model. The other thing is, I talked to him one time regarding the. I said, Peter, I've done a lot of research, but I haven't seen any references to the CPAC model before the Leader's Handbook, and he confirmed that. He said there was, as far as he knows, he's he originated. It was the original presentation of it came from him. So, all right. So I never missed the chance to mention these four people. A lot of people have influenced my thinking, but these four people I mention them because we use a lot of their work in this study. Of course, it was through Dr. Deming in 1987. Through just accidentally came across some of his video tapes, and I learned about Ackoff and about Schuhart, Ackoff, and Scholtes. And Scholtes and I turned out to become friends and neighbors actually here in Madison. In this module and this chapter, Peter begins by presenting some of the sort of old practices of these dysfunctional organizations and the kind of things that you hear often a lot in the what Dr. Deming called it slogans and exhortations. Some organizations say the leaders practice forcefulness, we're great motivators, decisiveness, willfulness, assertiveness, results. We are results oriented. We're task oriented. We're an organization of integrity and diplomacy. These are some of the characteristics of leaders you hear now. And listen, I've sat through many talks and presentations on leadership, and I quite often find them, just vacuous and boring. They come through a list of do's and don'ts and really don't offer any substance. And there are many of them still around, and the list can go on ad infinitum. So he presents this as old practices. I really think there's they're old, but they're still practiced by many organizations and leaders. So Peter was really a great writer and thinker, and was able to articulate many of the topics. So his competency one it sets the framework as what a dysfunctional system is and how it functions. It says all of the empowered, motivated, teamed up, self-directed, accountable, re-engineered, and reinvented people you can muster cannot compensate for a dysfunctional system. When the system is functioning well, these other things are all just foo-for-all. When the system is not functioning well, these things are still only empty, meaningless twaddle. So it's really just all the activities that goes on in many organizations are clearly described: empowering and motivating and teaming up and self-directed teams and accountable, re-engineered, and all descriptions. Peter told me one time, he said they have this company said they have 5 what was the description? High-powered teams. And he said, well, how many low-power teams do you have? So with that, he worked his way into offering that the alternative to this kind of dysfunctionality is we have to think the ability to think in terms of systems and knowing how to lead systems. That's the competency one. In developing that, he relies a lot on Ackoff and Schuhart, and Deming. So I'll introduce a couple of principles that they offered. I just want to, if you have the Leader's Handbook, I ask you to read the foreword by Ackoff to the book. It's one of the strongest endorsements, particularly coming from Russell Ackoff. I think that's a great testament to the quality of the book that Peter wrote. So what the book says, what the leadership book says, and Peter suggests, it says we get so focused on the structure that we lose the relationships. He said we need to shift our thinking from structure, namely the train wreck or the old view of the organization, to looking at interdependencies as presented by Dr. Deming on this organization viewed as a system. So, although later we learn that structure drives the behavior in organizations, but all the focus and changes and reorganizations and moving things around in organizations um, is simply focusing on the structure rather than when we're talking about systems and systems thinking, we're talking about managing relationships, and that's the essence of interactions and interdependencies. They're relationships, and we're trying to move from this to this, and this is about relationships. It's about interactions and interdependencies, which is the essence of competency one. I came across this model several years ago by Institute for Healthcare Improvement model as how you go from a hierarchical and old view of the organization to a new view of the organization. And I used to share this with my students, and they really got it, what I meant by changing the model from a top-bottom to a cyclical relationship. So you take the same and transform it into a cyclical model or organization viewed as a system. IHI is the Institute for Healthcare Improvement, is one of the early organizations that promoted Dr. Deming's teachings. So since the Leader's Handbook makes a reference to Ackoff in this section, in this part, introducing the systems and systems thinking, I thought maybe I'll just suggest a few ideas that Ackoff suggests in terms of what is a system. He says a system is set of two or more elements. What is interesting, he calls them elements, and Dr. Deming says, and it's a network of components. Elements and components are used interchangeably. That a system is a set of two or more components that satisfies the following three conditions. The behavior of each element has an effect on the behavior of the whole. The behavior of the elements and their effects on the whole are interdependent. And however the subgroups of the elements are formed, each has an effect on the behavior of the whole, and none has an independent effect on it. That is, in blue, that is, the elements of a system are so connected that independent subgroups of them cannot be formed. So this is a general definition of a system. What's interesting that Deming's definition and Scholtes' definition and some of the people who teach Dr. Deming's teaching, a lot of that is organizational based, and that is organization from. I'm sorry, the reason I got distracted is someone trying to put something in chat to me because I can't see you and I can't read the chat.
Fazel, I just added that IHI has a really good YouTube channel.
Yeah,
With
okay.
videos going back years. So I think if anybody adds something to the chat, if they're trying to get your direction, they should probably just jump on the mic. Sorry for the interruption.
Yeah, no problem. So, yeah, IHI is started in the Northeast, I believe at Dartmouth, and is really very, very committed to teaching Dr. Deming's and quality. So that is, the elements of a system are so connected that independent subgroups of them cannot be formed. And And Ackoff uses quite a lot of human body as an example. You don't have you can't take your brain and put it on it is you that thinks, not your brain. It is you that waves and shakes hands and writes. It's not your hand. You cut off your hand and put it on the table. There is nothing can happen. So that effectiveness comes from its connection and interaction and interdependency with you. And that's looking at things in its totality. And then he uses an automobile. It's not the engine that transports you, it's the automobile. You take the engine out and put it in the corner, nothing will happen. It can't even transport itself. So therefore, a system is a whole that cannot be divided into independent parts. So two of the most important properties of a system is every part of a system has properties that it loses when separated from the system. That's what I was just talking about: the brain, the eyes, the hand. Once you separate them, there is nothing. They don't function anymore. And every system has some properties, is essential ones, that none of its parts do. So, as I said, a human body, a person, is a whole, and none of its parts, arms, legs, and things, don't have any independent activities. So then to rely on what Deming said about the system, a system is a network of interdependent components. He uses the term components. I don't know, are they elements or components? It's not that. That's not the point. Is that, but that work together for the aim of the system. I think this short sentence. Actually, I taught a course, and the entire course was based on this term and this definition, that a system is a network of interdependent components. And then we developed a lot of modules in there. A system is a network. Network has a technical term. It has a technical meaning. It's interesting that the origin of the word is from textile, when they were making nets, weaving. And then later on in railroad industry and the telephone industries, it's a series of connected elements. It's a network. A system is a network of interdependent components that work together, not separately, for a purpose, for the aim of the system. I think this short sentence, this short description, this short definition, every word in that definition weighs a ton. And it's a network of components. Okay? You can have the parts are necessary but not sufficient. These are some of my additions. They are interdependent components. I mean, not independent activities. And the work together. Ackoff talks quite a lot, this working together or interdependency. He introduces the concept of harmony. And that's when in a lot of his talks he uses you can have the best parts of the every automobile and put it together. You won't have an automobile. They might work together, but are they working in harmony? And he introduces that concept that the parts have to work harmoniously and for a purpose. It's not for random walks. You can have an aggregate of things. I heard Dr. Deming in the seminar mention that. So you have desks, you have computers, you have this, you have that, but do you have a system? So do a collection of parts, or do a collection of components constitute a system? And so are they arranged in a way for a purpose? That's when it becomes a system. And that's what Deming introduced as an organization viewed as a system. If you try to read that definition and look at this figure, you can see all of the elements, all of the characteristics in that definition is really portrayed in that figure. So in the Leader's Handbook, Peter makes some suggestions. What is a system? It refers to the interactions and interdependencies. And systems thinking, this is one of the best definitions I have seen. What is actually systems thinking? Remember, to me, systems thinking is always in plural. Systems thinking refers is a discipline, it's a way of thinking. You see the totality. Refers to the general reflex of habit of conceiving of reality in terms of inner dependencies, interactions, and sequences. So whatever happens, if I have the ability to think systemically, systems thinking, whatever happens, whatever I see, my view of the world, my looking at the data, my looking at the people, looking at their performance, and these are some of the things we talk about when we get to performance appraisal. Whatever comes out of my mouth, my view of the world that we talked about last module, it stems from it naturally comes from viewing the reality of what was going on in terms of interdependencies, interactions, and sequences. So when something happens, rather than say, what happened, you say, why happened? Why is a system question? Why did that happen? Instead of saying, who did that, you say, why did that happen? So those are in terms of systems thinking. And then processes refer to the components of a system. And they have their own purposes as well.
Makes
So
me think a bit about what Bill often says, when that kind of critique of when folks say, oh, I'm a systems thinker, as if that's a different thing. And he comes back with the question or with the reference or the thought that, we're all systems thinkers. It depends on the extent of the system to which we are applying our thought. And I think the distinction that Peter's making here is, are you focused on the interdependencies,
right,
as opposed to the functions?
exactly. You're not really focused on the part and the function. You're thinking about the interactions and interdependencies.
Mm-hmm.
So he shared the story with me. Go ahead.
The boundary of my system is me. There's a lot of people in that situation. They're systems thinkers, but the boundary doesn't go beyond them.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
I'm just struck by the sort of interconnect with this, with the work of Chris Crawford, who worked in games and interactive storytelling, and his view on trying to reformulate games around the verbs, the things you do, and the processes that exist in the world, and trying to make these dynamic storytelling worlds using those same ideas. There's like huge parallels there for me.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. There is a discussion about, is it the system, is it the process, so Peter shared a very interesting story with me. Sometimes he worked as a merchant on a merchant marine ships, right? I think on Lake Michigan. He said that one time he asked a mariner, what's the difference between a boat and a ship? He said, well, I don't know, but I know you can put a boat on a ship, but you can't put a ship on a boat. So anytime somebody asked him what's the difference between a process and a system, that he used that metaphor. When are you a ship or when are you a boat? So I found that very interesting.
Yeah, one of the concepts Bill Bellows used to offer us is everything's a subsystem.
Right. So there are systems, there are subsystems. I don't generally dwell on those things a lot because I just, I work towards, whatever it is I'm looking at, am I looking at these things? Am I seeing it in that perspective? So at any rate, so then the book moves into suggesting offering competency one, the the ability to think in terms of systems and knowing how to lead system. And here is the gist of some of the things he suggests and taps into Ackoff and Deming. A system is a whole composed of many parts. A system has a definable purpose, and we'll talk about purpose. Each part of the system contributes to the system's purpose, but no part can achieve that purpose. Just same as writing and thinking. Each part has its own purpose, but when it affects the whole system, the parts are interdependent. We can understand a part by seeing how it fits into the system. We cannot understand the system by identifying each part of the entire unassembled collection of parts. Taking it, the most important concept that I learned in those things from Ackoff was that once you take things apart, it loses its characteristic. It's no longer what it is. Once you take an engine out of the car, it loses its characteristics. When you cut a hand off, it loses its characteristics.
Its coherence.
Say that again?
It loses its coherence.
It loses its coherence. It loses its effectiveness.
And its purpose.
And its purpose.
It has no purpose by itself.
Mm-hmm. That poor little engine just sitting there.
Yes.
A poor little hand. Well, this is in one of the discussions I always had with mostly with managers and MBA students, that your effectiveness comes from your interactions and interdependencies with others. I can lock you up in a room with all the talent you have, with all the education you have, with all the experience that you have no impact or effectiveness at all. Your effectiveness comes from your interactions and interdependencies with others. That's where your effectiveness comes from. Yeah.
Artemis 2 is coming back to Earth as an example of that. Took a hell of a lot of people to make that happen.
So looking at the interactions among the parts might help us understand how the system works, but to understand why the system exists, we must look outside the system, usually at human events and larger systems. And Ackoff uses the example of a university as that to understand the university, you have to expand that. You have to understand the education system and then work your way back. So to understand the system, we must understand the purpose, its interaction, and its interdependencies. When you take a system apart, it loses its essential characteristics. Analysis involves looking at the parts. Synthesis involves looking at the whole. We need both of them. We need both analysis and synthesis. But synthesis comes first. In machine age thinking, cause and effect thinking is purely cause and effect thinking, is that we take it apart and try to find what caused what, and that's analysis. But synthesis is actually you begin by looking at the whole and work your way into the parts. When we look at an organization, we're looking at the complex social system as well as technical system. So I want to share with you, if this is the organization and this is the environment, I learned this concept from in an article by Emery and Trist. Both of them were Ackoff's contemporaries and wrote a lot on systems and systems thinking. And one of the books that is edited book is Systems Thinking by F.E. Emery. So if you look at this organization, and these are all the factors in the environment, there are some dynamics that's going on that is important to to consider. One is, if O stands for organization, is all the internal interactions and interdependencies that what's going on inside the organization. That's probably where most of the organizations spend their time. They just look at internal events. Then you have the interaction of or interdependency of the organization with the environment, and how interdependent you are with the environment, how you interact with the environment, or how the environment interacts with you. But there are also interactions and interdependencies with the elements of the environment that have no impact. They have no interactions or interdependencies with you. They make their own decisions. They make policies, procedures, and interact without any involvement from you. You know, laws and regulations and tax policies. You have no interactions. That's what's going on in the organization, outside the organization. It goes on in the environment. So how do you survive? How do you manage in these environments? As I said, most of our activities, organizational activities, is essentially in the first quadrant. What's going on inside the organization? All the changes. How do we interact with the organization? How do we affect what's going on in the organization, and how the organization environmental changes affects the organization? So that's very important, is because a lot of changes are going on in this area that we have to deal with, we have to manage. So I highly recommend Ackoff's book, Creating the Corporate Future, Plan or Be Planned For. That's the subtitle of it. The chapter 1. I referred to it in our last discussion. Ackoff says there are a lot of changes, rapid changes going on in our environment. Some of these changes we have control over, and some of them we don't have any control over. We have no control over the weather. All right? We have no control over the rain. But there are some changes that we have control over. All right? So how do we manage that? What are our strategies to deal with that? It says, for the changes that we cannot control, we build more immunity, greater immunity against those changes. So if the financial crisis has come, now, how did we build immunity against that? If the weather, as he suggests, is well, if you're outside and it's raining, you come inside and work. So how do you build more immunity against the changes that you have no control over? All right. There is a famous line, is from an umbrella salesman, that says, "Only a fool buys an umbrella on a rainy day. A wise person buys an umbrella on a sunny day." So every time I think about building immunity against the changes that I have no control over, that comes to my mind. And then you have greater control over the ones that over the others, the ones that you have control over. You have control over on innovation. You have control over your products and services. You have control over consumer research. What do your customers want? 5 years, 10 years, and 15 years from now. And that's exactly what Deming was talking about. What are you doing to be in business 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, and 20 years from now? That's building. These are the kind of changes that you have control over. And you can, and what the title of the book is, it says, plan the future, or it will be planned for you. So that's that's dealing with what's going on in in our environment and rapid changes that's going on. There are changes that we can control. There are changes we have no control. The changes we have no control, we build immunity against them and better planning for the changes we have control over. And that's how we can shape the future. We have control how to shape our future, individually and organization. I'm not helpless. I know. I
Well,
can. Uh-huh.
I think that speaks to just kind of the era that we're in right now with so much both rapid change and uh, increasing chaos at a national and international level. And so this idea, it reminds me of the saying about to shrink your sphere of concern to better match your sphere of influence. That it's crazy making if you spend your time worrying, you spin your wheels on all these things that you can't actually influence, that just worry you or upset you. And you can apply that to, concerns at a national or international level, and you can apply that to your organization, and you can apply that to your own personal desk. Whereas if you stay focused on the things that you can actually accomplish, it's kind of amazing how much you can actually accomplish when you keep your focus more appropriately tuned to your sphere of influence.
Thank you for sharing that because I'll talk about that in the summer when we're talking about Peter Scholtes and his contributions to Deming Way. He wrote a paper in mid 1980s called, what do you do? I'm working for this organization. I'm learning about all these concepts. I mean, I can't change the organization. What am I going to do? You get really frustrated. And he said, well, what do you do with your circle of influence and how you go that? And he called it be like a petunia in onion field. That was the title of the paper. And that's the title of a song from the 1950s. It's a very gloomy song. but how to be a petunia in an onion field. And that is how do you make changes in your area and how you influence your circle and expand from there. So, of course, how to respond to the rapid changes in the environment, Scholtes suggests offers a lifelong learning as a response to accelerating rate of change in the environment. That's one of his competencies later. And he suggests the model to achieve this goal is PDSA cycle for learning. So I try to superimpose that idea we just talked about, your organization. I try to superimpose that on what is if you are a hierarchical organization, train wreck organization, top bottom organization, or if you are a Deming organization viewed as a system. Which one of them is more apt and prepared to respond to changes in the environment and plan the future? Okay, and you can see this one, this rigid top-bottom old view of the organization versus this cyclical relationship. I try to expand this where actually this consumer research and customers are in the environment and how you manage that. All these suppliers are in the environment, this feedback loop. So the organization viewed as a system is much more prepared to respond to the changes in the environment than a hierarchical top-bottom organization. So that requires understanding of systems and managing the organization as a system. So what are some principles of systems thinking? Then again, I just read to you what Peter suggested as systems thinking refers to the general reflex of habit of conceiving of reality in terms of interdependencies, interactions, and sequences. And if each part of a system considered separately is made to operate as efficiently as possible, the system as a whole will not operate as effectively as possible. In that chapter 1 of Ackoff's book, I just suggested he addresses the question of efficiency and effectiveness, and I think is very important to make that distinction. We need both, but they're different, and he suggests uh, uh, efficiency is doing things right, and effectiveness is doing the right thing. And his famous line is better to do the right thing wronger than the wrong thing righter, uh, speaks to that. So you might make each part to run very efficiently, but the whole system is not running effectively. And of course, Deming in the Out of the Crisis and in the New Economics and some examples talks about that quite a bit. The performance of a system depends more on how its parts interact than how they act independently of each other. The value and function of a part comes from its place in the system and its interaction with the other parts in the system for a stated purpose. And the questions about the parts do not explain the behavior of the whole. And then this is really speaks to the a lot of the problems and some of this dysfunctionality in organizations. It says structure drives the behavior. We hear in organizations, oh, our people don't work together. They don't communicate. They're not motivated. Well, these are, when we say the structure drives behavior, do you have a structure in place that promotes lack of communication, demotivation? And I heard this in a seminar, either by Dr. Deming or somebody that was asking him questions. When somebody asked Dr. Deming, our people don't work together, he said, well, what is your compensation policy? That was totally seemingly unrelated to the question at hand. What is your compensation policy? How do you compensate people? If your compensation policy is based on competition, well, that's going to build barriers. If the structure is set up for people to compete against each other, that's the first destroyer of communication. What structure do you have in place that actually kind of promotes these things, builds barriers, demotivates people, causes low morale? So it's the structure that drives the behavior. So as we read in the dysfunctional activities, as many organizations have, send them to motivational classes, have speakers and accountability and this and that. You're not thinking systemically. You're not looking at the organization and interactions and interdependencies. So then we just talked about that if each part of a system considered separately is made to operate efficiently as possible, the system will not operate effectively. The best example I've heard is Dr. Deming saying 4 solos does not make a quartet, even if each soloist is the best in his class. The value and function of a part comes from its place in the system. And questions about the parts do not explain the behavior of the whole. So I can study hydrogen and oxygen all I want. It doesn't say anything about the properties of water, even though water consists of hydrogen and oxygen. So questions about hydrogen and oxygen does not explain the properties of water, even though hydrogen and oxygen are the 2 components of the water. So So the solution to a problem is rarely where you find the problem. Ackoff says the solution to a headache is not in the head. Right? The solution to a headache is a pill you take that is absorbed by your stomach. And false assumptions about the system behavior. We're sure of something, not examine assumptions behind that. As they say, it ain't what you don't know that hurts you, it's what you do know that ain't so. Okay? Optimizing the pieces destroys the effectiveness of the whole. That's Deming talks quite about that. And there is a paper called The Tragedy of the Commons, and that it speaks to that. And essentially creating competition, and in the 80s and 90s, these profit centers, creating profit centers in the organizations were popular. And interdependencies are often complex and widely separated in time and space. Just think of a decision we make on training. Let's cut the training budget. It may be 3 years, 5 years, or 10 years that you see the impact of that. All the public policies regarding our education system, it may take 10 years before you see the effect of that.
More than that when you consider how long it takes a child to make their way through the system.
That's what so you make a decision about the educational system, it may take 12 years as how the high schools are going to look like. Some of the purchasing policies we have in organizations, it may take a while before you see the impact of that. Okay. So when I teach this, when I was teaching this to my students, especially the undergraduates, these are very young students, 20-something, and I was talking about these concepts, they always enjoyed the example of a car and its parts and music. So I always shared this slide with them when I wanted to show them what happens when you take the parts, the organization apart, and 4 solos does not make a quartet. And I would show them the car and all its parts, and there are several hundred parts that make up a car. It's the automobile that takes you around. And then I would use this is Chicago Symphony, actually. I use that as an example, and I played a piece of music. All these 70, 80 musicians on the stage moving at the same time, doing the same thing, and using the same music. And I was always reminded of what Dr. Deming said. An example of a system is a good orchestra. So everybody is there for the same purpose. They're not prima donnas. If they were prima donnas, they wouldn't be on that stage. Nobody is there to play the loudest. Nobody is there to play the longest. They're all there for the same purpose. And then I would use that as an example of 4 solos does not make a quartet. I would tell this is a quartet. I would take them apart and I would say, you see, each one of them, it takes to be a quartet, you have to work as a system. They always enjoy that. And I related that to the organization viewed as a system. So one of the greatest contributions Peter had to promoting Dr. Deming's idea was the development of the CPARC model. As he says, this is not a replacement for the organization viewed as a system. It's an elaboration on Dr. Deming's systems view. It is an indispensable first step in understanding how the new philosophy applies to people and daily work. He really, and I strongly believe that, he operationalized the philosophy. He operationalized the organization viewed as a system. So you can say, well, you're telling me all this about the organization as a system and all these good definitions, but what am I going to do? And that's where I think that's Peter's contribution. And and the CPAC model, you look at it going from right to left, and it starts with the purpose. Quite a bit of the book is dedicated to the CPAC model in detailed activities, the type of data to collect, how to analyze certain aspects of the CPAC model. It's very rich in that area. So we start with the CPAC model. I put this here because I'm always impressed by this, what he said about the feedback loop, and I use it later in the next module. This is the feedback loop. That the feedback loop is the mother's milk of improvement. Nobody has done a better job to describe that. As vital it is mother's milk to the child, the feedback loop is that vital to the improvement of the system. The feedback loop is the mother's milk of improvement.
I used to have a boss who would say the quality of the decision that we'll make here today, and his couple of points for quality would be would it stand the test of time? Would it foresee the things that are foreseeable? And would it achieve the purpose of whatever the question before it was? And he used to say that the quality of the decision that we make here today is directly related to the diversity of perspective that contributes to the decision, to our thinking about that decision. And I think about your feedback loop within that context. Am I thinking about all of those different pieces of information, all of that different, the information that should be that should contribute to the diversity of perspective that feeds the decision.
Yeah. Other comments? I just want to go ahead.
I was just going to say, I wondered how many in this session today have actually used the CPAC model?
We used it at Rocketdyne several places, several times. I facilitated some of the events.
I've never encountered it in actual practice, but my own practices for the pieces of orgs that I run operate this way.
I've done a lot of work with public schools and other public agencies, and I would say I've not seen, so similar to Ben, I've not seen it applied exactly in this way, but some of the best schools that I have worked with have certainly followed the philosophy of this. I've seen the structure of this CPAC model, even if I didn't see the same specifics.
Yeah.
Yeah, I worked with a company, Joan Wellman and Associates. We were doing healthcare improvement, specializing in children's hospitals, and we applied this very actively.
It was interesting.
Go ahead, Mike.
I was just going to say my first exposure to it, and it was interesting because they didn't refer to as the CPAC model, and it was used in the context of a value stream, but not in the entirety of the system. It connected we call them the chunks of the value stream, and it was placed between each, and it became so it was a microcosm of the system, and it was the connectivity between the process above, right, and then what flowed into the next process. And it wasn't until probably 2 years later I'm like, wait a minute, these guys are essentially using a CPAC model to define the connection between pieces of the value stream, which was a very interesting. So then we started doing it for the entire system, but I found it really very valuable as you looked at the interconnectivity between two chunks of the value stream.
Well, the way I find this very helpful because it really operationalizes this, and I think it's helpful. Yeah, this gives us a global view of the organization viewed as a system, but as Peter says, this is simply an elaboration and is the first step in understanding how the new philosophy works.
Mm.
And in the book, he has multiple areas of discussing all these elements of the CPAC model with detailed instructions and suggestions as how to go about looking at some of this, like on the feedback loop, on who's the customers. The feedback loop and the customer is next module next week. But I find it helpful. It's sort of the operationalized the philosophy or the model that Deming suggested, and I think that's might be as far as some of the people we work with is more accessible to them. I did ask either my clients or particularly all my students, particularly MBA students who were mostly managers, mid-level to high-level managers, they would develop a CPAC model for their organization, and it offered quite insight as understanding what the organization was doing or was not doing. That was the more important part of it.
Hmm.
So the model begins with the purpose. So we'll touch on a couple of things about the purpose. A system must have a purpose. Why? Why should the system have a purpose? We always discuss we should have a purpose because without a purpose, there is no direction. All right, we are moving in all different directions. It's the purpose, it's the alignment that gives the direction. Everybody moving in the same direction. Deming said that many years ago in the 14 points. Constancy of purpose. Point 1 is the constancy of the purpose that directs all of our resources, all of our forces, everything towards the aim. And that's what this is. Everything is aimed towards this. Consumers. Constancy of purpose. Everything is moving that direction. It's in a cyclical manner, but so you go from a random walk to directed efforts. This is Deming's word. I like this word, orchestrated. You orchestrate, just like a conductor that's sitting on that symphony. He or she orchestrates, brings everybody together for one purpose. So when you have something like that, as I mentioned earlier, you have an aggregate of elements. It's a collection of things. There is no purpose or direction. Order is not important. We're all moving in different directions. Okay? Marketing is one direction, production is one direction, purchasing in one direction, everybody. Okay? As in terms of arrangements, order of things are important. Purpose and direction. Things work together harmoniously. Here is the Ackoff's term. Harmoniously, effectively, and efficiently and effectively for one purpose. Everything moves in the same direction. So these are some of the definitions and description of purpose that Scholtes has in the book, and I find them very, very descriptive as what the purpose is. He says, a shared vision or a purpose is the glue that holds people together. It's a glue. Yeah. It gives everybody a sense of purpose and direction. Who we are as an organization, what we do, and where we are headed. He has a whole section in the book on that. It should create excitement, learning, focus, boundaries, challenge, and commitment. When we are moving, that's what this does. Okay. It's a force in people's hearts, a force of impressive power, a desire to connect. The purpose of the organization is related to the benefits or capabilities acquired by the customers. It's not, you don't describe this in terms of products and services. It's in terms of what benefits or capabilities the customers gain as the result of their interaction with your organization. And this is what we talk about next module when we talk about customers. What benefits or capabilities your customers gain as a result of their interaction with you rather than with somebody else? Benefits and capabilities. I think the word capability has a lot of meaning here. What capabilities do I gain as a result of interactions with you? And finally, one that is really it's been a great teaching tool for me is Peter's definition of the purpose of an organization. He says, in my opinion, the purpose of an organization should be altruistic. That really resonates with a lot of people. It really resonates. The purpose of an organization should be altruistic, focused on doing good for the society. What are we doing for the customers, quality of goods and services, to improve the community and the environment and its own long-term survival? That's altruism. So as an organization, whatever you develop, what are you doing? Must be altruistic, meaning what good are you doing for the society? What are we doing for the customers? Quality of goods and services, improve the community and the environment and its the long-term survival. That really captures Dr. Deming's philosophy. We talked about that last week, that Peter's connected Deming philosophy to the mystic monk Desjardins, that what Deming is doing philosophy is helping people evolve, helping our society to evolve. It's helping the humankind. I think this concept of altruism, Peter tapped into that. And he tapped into his own understanding, philosophy, commitment, the kind of human being he was, his own contributions. He tapped into Ackoff's concept of organization as a system, as a community. He tapped into Ackoff's concept of development. How can we do better? And he tapped into the soul of the business. It's a book, but the business has to have a soul. And over the years, ever since I've started using the Leader's Handbook, either in my classrooms or in my work with organizations, that really resonates with people. That the purpose of organization is altruistic. What good are you trying to do?
And that makes me think about Ackoff and one of his presentations at Intuin many years ago, somewhere, and I don't remember the larger context of the presentation from which this particular piece of content caught my ear, but he talked about how often businesses put in their mission and vision statements something to the effect of making a profit, and how ridiculous that is. That'd be like, as a human being, saying part of my purpose in life is to breathe in and out. Like, breathing in and out is a condition that's necessary in order to continue to accomplish whatever my purpose is. But breathing in and out isn't my grand vision.
Yeah, you can't continue as a going concern if you are not making a profit and doing something with that. Like, it's just impossible. I'm finding, like, I keep thinking back to what Maturana and Ferreira's the tree of knowledge, right? And poetic systems and self-replication, right? And the company exists to basically keep itself existing. So,
and you can't exist without continuing to turn profit, but you can be creative in how you think about that. Because, right, a nonprofit organization brings in its resources through motivating people to be willing to write a check, to support their mission or their vision. But the money coming in isn't the mission or vision. It's the condition that's necessary to continue to exercise the mission and vision.
Well, I know in the Out of the Crisis, Deming shows his interactions with, I can't think of his name, Noriaki, I think a Japanese colleague he had, that the Americans put the horse before the cart. They think profit comes first. It says if they our policy is if you provide a product and a service that customers want and is willing to pay for it, the profit would follow.
Mhm.
So that's one of Deming's theorem. Nobody gives a hoot about profit.
Yeah, I'm not motivated by the scissor company's profit when I decide which pair of scissors to buy. I'm motivated by how well does the scissor fit my hand? How well does it function
Right.
for the purpose?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God, what objectified uh what is it? Who's the creator? It's a fantastic documentary that follows OXO about around in their design process as part of the documentary. If you've never seen it, the whole Gary Huswit, Helvetica, Objectified, and Urbanized are the three films. They're fantastic.
I'll look for that.
What is the first one?
Helvetica. So they're referred to as the design trilogy. So Helvetica is about graphic design and sort of the history of the font Helvetica.
Can
Um,
you put that in the
I
chat
will. I'll
there?
put some links. I'll grab a link for y'all.
Okay, that'll be
But
good. That'll be
it's
helpful.
really good. It's really.
Something else I heard from Dr. Deming once, or maybe I read it. If you don't do what the customer wants, soon you join the nonprofit organizations. All right. So we'll talk about briefly, we have a few minutes left, talk about, since we're talking about systems and systems thinking, we have to address interactions and interdependencies. And what we experience as our complex system of interacting problems, not individual problems. There is interactions and interdependency, and the effort of the various divisions in a company organization, each given a job, are not additive. Their efforts are interdependent. So that's the greatest interdependence between components, the greater will be the need for communication. And Deming uses the concept of a bowling, an orchestra, a city, and a nation. More interdependent you are, more is the need for uh, uh, for in communications. And my students, especially undergraduate students, loved it when I said, "Well, if you're playing tennis, singles, you don't. It's between you and the opponent and the net and the ball and your racket. There's not but if you're playing doubles, then the level of communication increases now because there is more interdependencies, and they seem to appreciate that example. So perhaps the greatest challenge facing today's leaders is to learn to help people understand and appreciate their interdependence. Yeah. These are all from the Leader's Handbook. We are socially interdependent because as humans we need each other. No man is an island. We are systemically interdependent because that's how good work gets done. So now I just put this here because I think about that often when we're thinking about interactions and interdependencies. Deming in his definitions uses interdependent. Um, um, that's quite often used in the definition. What is interaction? I just came up with this, and we can talk about it another time. Interaction is one affects the other, and interdependence, one needs the other. We need both of them. We need interactions and interdependencies. Now, the level of that interaction and that level of interaction is probably hinges on our interdependencies. I interact with a lot of my colleagues, but I'm on committees with them, and I see them on the campus. We talk, and I interact quite a bit, but I'm not as interdependent. I don't need them. I need them socially for social interaction, but in terms of the organizational structure. So perhaps you can give this some thoughts as how to use these terms, interactions and interdependencies, and we can discuss it at another time. So
One of
this
the
is
things that one of the
uh-huh.
things that strikes me about interactions, whether they're interdependent or not, is in an organization as the number of people increases, the number of interdependencies and interactions increases, tenfold. And
Yeah,
if you're trying to make things better, you have a great opportunity in interdependencies and interactions because there are way more of them instead of working
yeah.
on the individuals.
The best example of how to really highlight the management of interactions is Deming's example in the out of the crisis. I mean, excuse me, out of the new economics. I just put it there just to highlight that. We don't have time to discuss it in details. And in here, I last week I asked to share Ian's paper and I sent it to everybody. Without consulting with him, I put him in the program, but he's not going to be here today. So, so here is uh, as in the left hand look, there was a failure to communicate. So we'll get back to him at a later time. So here is some questions that I always put in the classes and in my work with organizations. And this is the first one is actually from Deming. Can you show the elements or parts of the organization as a system? I just put it how they interact. How are they interdependent? How the organization or your job, department, project as a system? How do they work as a system? And this was always an exercise, and the students or the uh, organizations I work with, they had to take this home and come back with responses. And on the purpose element of the CPOC model, I also some of these questions comes from the Leader's Handbook. What this particular page does: what do you like about what you do here? What do you like about your industry or profession? What do you like about your company when it is at its best? What legacy do you want to leave behind? Your personal contributions to this organization. What legacy do you think we collectively should leave behind? What is my own personal job and how do my functions fit into the larger purpose and systems of the organization? And that goes back to the earlier discussion. What can I do in my area of influence?
Yeah,
And
one of the interesting things about the last question, if the organization doesn't have a purpose or
right.
the purpose is not understood, you can't do that last one very well.
That's
My
true.
job is no, my job is always to tear down silos in the organizations in which I work and to increase the number of interactions and interdependence in the org. That's the only thing I ever work on, right? Because it seems like almost everywhere has this problem where it's too siloed off.
All right. The structure drives the behavior, Ben. So
Yep.
how is the structure set up to that kind of prevents people from working together? And again, more questions, purpose-related questions from the book. And these are really good exercises. I encourage you, if you're working, and you can, these are in your handouts, um, uh, is to use them. These are directly from the book. What business are you in? Why does the organization exist? What business are you not in? What benefits and capabilities, this is, and we'll talk about that more next week, what the benefits and capabilities the customers gain from interaction with your organization. Where is the organization headed in the long term? What are the priorities for short term? Is the purpose connected to the customer needs? not products and services, but the customer needs. And here is the discussion of purpose and profit. And my purpose here would always be develop an altruistic purpose for your organization. These were all exercises I asked them to do. All right. So here is some list of the um, here is a list of questions that I had um, submitted for discussion. You can, if you have it in front of you, you can look at that, or this is time for discussion. You can jump in. And some of this came from the book. Discuss the difference between systems and such things as a structure and policy. Discuss Scholtes' statement that the purpose of your organization, therefore, is related to the benefits or capabilities acquired by your customers as a result of their interactions with you. What do they gain as a result of their interaction with you? What capabilities, benefits, and capabilities? Discuss the concept of altruism in establishing the purpose of your organization, and then developing a CPAC model for your organization. How you relate that to the Deming's organization viewed as a system. So we have about 10, 15 minutes for roundtable discussion. I'm gonna stop sharing so I can see everybody, and we'll have a discussion on these or any of the concepts we talked about today. Any thoughts? Or do you want me to share the slide with you? No?
But I feel like I've been jumping in as you go. So my thoughts and my questions and reflections I've been sharing along the way, and I don't have an itch in my brain right now with a particular question or comment to add at the end.
Yeah. A lot of the people I referred to, starting with Deming and Cohort, Myron Tribus, many of the people you have read and studied, Brian Joyner, his fourth generation man, they all say about the purpose of organization. Be sure that's not connected to a product and a service. What does that mean? Deming says that I've heard him say that in presentations. What do they mean? Why not? Why can't you say the purpose of my organization is to make bicycles?
Well, because for the companies who were making carburetors, they are no longer in business at
That's
this
a
point.
good example. That's Deming's example. Yeah.
Right. There's, I guess, but the entire industry of working with horses as the main mode of transportation just was obliterated by the introduction of the automobile once it hit a certain level of like reliability and utility, right? And so you don't want to be like our only business is like we make spark plugs or whatever, right? The spark plug manufacturers are going to be very unhappy as electric cars take over.
So what was the VCR rental company? I can't think of the name of it.
Blockbuster.
Where is Blockbuster now?
It didn't work out for them,
because they were in the business of video rentals.
Well, actually, they interestingly were one of the first companies to develop a video streaming service as well. They'd done that development internally. They just couldn't because their core business was this video rental business, and they viewed themselves from that aspect. They didn't understand how to become the leader in the next one. That's all of Clayton Christensen's innovator's dilemma and disruptive innovation work, right? So
that goes along with Kodak having invented the first electronic camera.
Yep. They they invented all these technologies that Xerox and the personal computer, they invented the personal computer in terms of like GUI interfaces and things, and they couldn't figure out how to like drive that because they're like, well, it doesn't drive the copier business, so blah. So it's a very hard problem, right? And a lot of companies like do that to themselves. You pigeonhole yourself.
I've had some
Creative
experience with,
destruction looks just like,
oh, go ahead, Mike.
go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Mike, you go ahead.
Yeah. Mention that I've had experience with clients that had an incredible purpose, but they never spoke to it. And we uncovered that, and it became every time we got together once a week to do our updates, we started with what was the mission and vision of the company and anchored the entire conversation around that. So it's interesting that some companies have figured this stuff out, but they're not using it in a way that actually drives behaviors.
Go ahead, the other Mike.
Well, I was just going to make a minor comment. There's nothing there.
I've got some neighbors doing some particularly loud work here now, so I think for me that's my cue to step off of this call. But I thank you all for a really thoughtful session this week, and I look forward to next week.
Yeah. See you. Take care.
Fazel,
know,
I was just going to say, as you and I have talked about a number of times, and I think this group has, a lot of this is still very foreign to companies. And so
yeah.
when you come in and you start talking about these things, you can see that I forget what the term was the other day about it's kind of a mind explosion that happens when you start to actually
Brain
go,
shaking.
my gosh,
Brain shakers.
there we go, brain shakers, exactly. So what I love about going through all these materials, and a lot of these books have been written decades ago, this is still the raw material, right, that we need to use to educate, companies. And the more I understand this, it's like I've got a really good understanding of doing this for a few, quite a few years. But sitting in groups like this and hearing from yourself, it's great going through books. But when you have personal experience with the author and with others that provided, content, it's just fantastic. I really enjoy this.
Yeah, I've really been enjoying. I joined a different community after the New Economics reading group last fall, and I joined the Flow Collective because I was like, oh my God, these are my people. And I've been having fantastic interactions with the author of like one of the best books I've ever read about DevOps ever. Like I was like, oh, this is fantastic. And he comes and he's on the like groups and you can go and we can have like an hour-long chat with him and like one other person. It's fantastic.
So, Mike, in terms of the challenges, but organizations, and I've been doing this for a long time and I've had my own ups and downs. I find it that sometimes, depending on who you talk to, but often it's easier to talk to a lot of people about the CPAC model than the system of profound knowledge. So now it's easier to get to the system of profound knowledge if you start with CPAC model. But if you start with the system of profound knowledge, getting to the CPAC model is going to be challenging. So that's why I
Yeah, I
think
wrote.
that's why I think just one more thing, Ben. That's
Yeah.
what I think the Leader's Handbook really operationalized the system of profound knowledge. He says that at the beginning. He says the system of profound knowledge. This is operational. This is not a replacement for it. It's operationalized that, and I think it's rich with all the um, uh, elements of that in terms of what to do, how to do, and which direction to go. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ben.
No, no, no. Right. I was gonna say, right, this is I first read Out of the Crisis, I don't know, decade and a half ago, maybe 2012. And it was not absorbable for me at that time. Like I hadn't it had enough experience. I was in like my first job that wasn't working with like basically friends and family. And I couldn't absorb that material then. I didn't like get it. Um, And while we were doing the New Economics reading group this past fall, I was like, oh, this all like makes sense to me, but I have all this additional experience, right? I've been working for another
Yeah.
decade and change. I'd read a lot more. I was right. I'd used Deming as a sort of starting point to get into all sorts of related things. I've been listening to the Deming podcast for basically a year prior. Um, and it's that what you're looking to try to do is you're trying to essentially find the like bridging knowledge that allows a person to get from the things they know to more either to Deming himself or to like bridge material like the leader's handbook. And it's and having read broadly in these topics, I can now be like, oh, here's the right book for you that'll help you like get the stepping stones that you need to get to the sort of core philosophy parts, because it is Deming's own writing is super dense, because he was very particular about his language. And so if you didn't understand like his exact definition of the word that he was using in that context, it makes him hard to understand when reading direct. And that's what I'm enjoying about the Leader's Handbook. It feels like a sort of like a decompression
Yeah.
Deming, and that's why it's long, right? It's not a short book. So
It really
yeah,
expanded on
right.
that. And I think
It
that
basically takes these,
decompression word is good.
yeah.
I'll tell Peg Scholtes when I see her next. That's a good description. It's like I don't know if you follow the um, any of the Rumi poetry. That's the Sufi mystic. He Malcolm, not Malcolm, Coleman Barks, who translated a lot of that to English. He just passed away a couple of weeks ago. His friend was an author, and he gave him a copy of the Rumi's poems, and he told him, "Get them out of their cages." So, so meaning make it more accessible.
Yeah.
And I think Peter's book makes a lot of those concepts more accessible.
Yeah, I am sad that I did not run across this sooner, right? I had not heard of this book until I saw the in thinking thing saying, hey, we're going to do a reading group on this. I'd never heard of this.
Yeah. It's a great book. So we'll talk about Peter himself and some of his other work. That's my presentation in the summer, in the July
Yeah.
forum.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah.
we'll meet at the July forum if you're there in
Yeah.
person. I'm planning to attend.
So next week we'll talk about the CPOC model and then the customers and feedback loop. And then I don't know, depending on how much time we have for the whole duration of the study, we touch on different elements. But I do want to get towards the end of it. I do want to get to one of the biggest Peter's contributions, and that is debunking the performance appraisal. He was the best in that area. And
Oh
I want to,
God, I do not understand performance appraisal. It
well,
makes no sense. I understand what we think we're trying to do, but it's delusion.
as somebody says, a performance appraisal is the day that you find out who is in control.
Yep.
All right, so it's time for us to depart. So it was nice seeing you all, and hopefully I see you next week.
Thank you, Fazel.
All right, take care. Take care.
Have a good week.
You too.
Thanks.